Hola, hola, mi gente. Welcome to another episode of the Wine and Chisme podcast. I'm here with
Ellie
and
Zelda.
And Zelda. So this is, I always tell Ellie, our time is when I get to kind of experiment with different things.
Mm-hmm.
And, I've used the iPad once before to do a live, but I did it before we had the mics. So this is the first time we're actually getting to use the mic and actually recording it like this. We've been saying for the longest time, and we have recorded in person together.
Yes.
I think
Once.
this is our
Ellie?
third time,
Oh,
right?
okay.
I think this is our third time.
3 times, yeah.
The first one was for Barbie.
Yep, we did it back there.
Yes. I think both times we did it back there. Or maybe did we do it in your office? Maybe it was only one other time. I feel like
you're
it was
right.
Just kidding.
We just love recording together so much live. Yeah.
But, obviously I was up here for my wedding dress fitting.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, well, let's make a day of it.
Yes, a girl's day.
Yeah. So that's why my hair's back, because I actually pulled more hair back than it was originally. But I wanted to see how the wedding dress would look. And I walk in, the lady's like, oh, did you get your makeup done? I'm like, I did my makeup, thank you.
I love that.
But I just wanted like the full experience. And now I still have to get earrings and a necklace.
Yes. And you were telling me you're looking at some Latina brands.
Yes. But it's expensive. I mean, God, that's the one thing with weddings is expensive. But you know what? We're celebrating today, because we're recording this officially on the 4-year anniversary of the Wine and Chisme podcast.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you. Well, speaking of, we could cheers, because we're having some Estancia Pinot Grigio. Pinot Grigio is definitely not my normal go-to.
This is what we had in stock.
Yes. Because Ellie is not prepared for wine and chisme. She's only always prepared for the chisme, not always the wine.
Exactly. I'm always here for the chisme, but never the actual wine part.
Because I will say this is a little sweet, but it does have like some crispness to it. I taste apple.
Right. It's like crisp and fresh, not overly sweet.
Yeah. So I can handle this.
I love that one. It's perfect for you. I was waiting for you. The last 2.
Well, it's not perfect for me.
But just
time. It's what was on hand and which is fine, because that's what happens sometimes. Mm-hmm. I mean, not at my house.
You're like, not at my house. But we roll with the punches. We're entrepreneurial.
Yes,
we're just
this is what I always have to prepare myself for coming here.
Exactly. You're like, do you actually have any wine? Were you prepared this time? I'm like, no. Once again, I wasn't prepared. Although I do have.
Wait, even Owen did say, why don't you prepare? She's coming.
I know. I'm terrible with wine, guys. It's bad.
It's okay. It's all right. So we decided for this 4-year anniversary, we would talk really about our entrepreneurial journeys, what it takes, because, honestly, having this podcast is an entrepreneurial journey, and and things ebb and flow and all of the things. But I started out with saying, let's just talk about how entrepreneurship sucks.
Yes.
But does it, right? It sucks and it doesn't at the same time. So, salute to the 4 years. Super excited about, hitting 4 years. It's such a milestone. Mm-hmm. We recently hit 200 episodes. But now it's like, now what, right? Yeah. What has this journey been like? And then beyond that, what does it take? When you're an entrepreneur, and everybody has their own paths, right? Everybody has their own things, but I think there's, I think so much time we focus on, the saying is, if you do something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. That's horse shit.
Yeah.
Horse shit. Because I absolutely love what I do with the podcast. And it does still stress me out.
Yeah, of course. And the more you love something, I think that you want to do a better and better job at it. And to do that, there's always so much competition, and you want to get it exactly right and do it in a certain way, and it's just hard to kind of excel to that level and be able to meet your expectations. So
no, for sure. I think, well, we're one of the things that we were talking about, and I know we'll get into that, but one of the things we're talking about is when you figure out or when you think you want to start this entrepreneurial
I'm not
journey.
sure I understand.
Well, sorry, Siri, you don't need to understand.
Siri's
You're
like,
not part of this
I
conversation.
Third guest.
She really wants to be in it. Siri, you're not part of this conversation. Go back to sleep.
It looks like you.
I actually thought when you said Siri again, she's gonna talk again.
Yes.
I was just waiting for it. Oh my God, Siri is the third guest.
Since you wrote down notes, because we went and had our little thing.
We had a beautiful girly brunch today. I told Jess, like, I want you to come to LA and visit me, and we'll go out. Like, we had such a good time. I guess that was the last time that we recorded here in person.
Oh yeah, so this is the third time.
Oh, it is the third time.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that time was either the first or the second time.
Because we just had like a girls' weekend.
Yeah, we had like a girls' weekend. I was here by myself in the house, and Jess came, and we literally had like 2 nights, and we just had the best time. It was basically like girly sleepover. It was very nostalgic. We watched movies. Oh, that's when we watched the Beckham documentary.
That's right.
So we were just
did you notice the did you watch the Super Bowl, by the way?
I did not watch the Super Bowl. I know we're going to talk about
That's the only reason. First of all, Ellie. Bad Ellie.
You're just constantly dealing with me where, like, didn't have the wine, isn't fully caught up on the Chisme. Guys.
Well, one of the commercials was them making, like, it was I think it was like an Uber Eats or commercial or something like that, where it's like, in order to remember something, you need to forget something else.
Yes.
And her and David Beckham were part of that. So as were Jennifer Aniston and David Schwimmer.
I did hear about this one.
Yes. Yeah. And he's like, what was it? You're part of the pepper people? And she's like, it's this or that. And it was just, yeah. So it just reminded me of that.
Yeah. I saw that one actually going viral because there was this situation where I think it was like I had a peanut allergy and he forgot.
Oh, yeah.
He had a peanut allergy, and then she was forgetting who David Schwimmer was on Friends. And he's like, we worked together 10 years.
Like, I would forget 10 years of my life.
Yeah. Well, I'm very forgetful, and this is part of what we'll talk about later, why I have 2 pages of notes.
And why I don't have
podcast, and why she never has notes, because everything just like goes out one ear for me and flies out the other, and somehow I managed to be here today. Look how cute Zelda is. Zelda, just come back on camera. She's our third guest.
Aww. She's like, leave me alone.
Yeah, she's like,
literally like that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that, we were just kind of talking about like covering entrepreneurship today and how it is very difficult, and it's kind of been glorified lately, especially as like it's kind of become easier in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I feel like it's become so much harder.
I feel like people think, well, if I'm not an entrepreneur, what am I doing with my life?
Right.
Almost. And I'm going to be super duper honest. Like, I think for the longest time, I wanted to be an entrepreneur. Like, I thought I wanted to be different, right?
Yeah.
I thought I wanted to be an entrepreneur. But then I also was like, well, then who am I accountable to? Or what am I, and I just always felt like I needed balance with somebody else to help with that.
Yeah.
To be like, okay, this is what we need to do, because I am so more of the creative person, right? And I can do things, but I have to have deadlines.
Right.
Like, I am that type of person. I can't just have an infinite deadline, because I promise you it'll never get done.
Right.
I'll do like little parts and pieces. And then when somebody's like, I need it next week, then I'm like, do my best work.
Yeah,
and then
like, my ass is on fire. Like, let's do this.
Yeah. And that's how I work really well. So for me, trying it different ways just never worked. But for the podcast, I absolutely have deadlines.
Right.
I have people who are expecting a new episode every Wednesday. I have people who need to be interviewed. So I think for me, this really appeals to the best of what I'm capable of in regards to having conversation, getting people to spill the chisme on their own terms,
Mm-hmm.
and not feeling like I am like pinning anybody to do anything.
Right.
I'm not like a gotcha person.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just like, I want you to share your story. Maybe it can help somebody else, or maybe it could, in whatever way. So for me, that's what's made it a journey worth traveling for me. I mean, there's so much more, and there's
Mm-hmm.
things that I'm like, want to pull my hair out and just go, why am I doing this? But you're an entrepreneur
Mm-hmm.
as well, and you're more, I think, of what people think an entrepreneur is. Like, people may not look at a podcaster and think that we're an entrepreneur,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that evolves, and depending on what you're doing, like for me, it's actually evolved over the last 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
But you've kind of taken more of that traditional entrepreneurial journey
Yeah.
with your business. So you want to talk a
Yes.
little bit about that?
Yeah, and I will say, before I kind of mention it, something I was thinking about, because yes, podcasting, um, if you're an independent podcaster, as in you're not, let's say, working at a media company that is providing you with the platform and the resources and the editorial team and the content team and the producers and all of that stuff, that's a little different. You're not really entrepreneurial in that sense. But um, somebody like you who's just like, I came up with this idea, I pursued it, I did it, I'm in charge of making sure this comes out like you said, and giving yourself the deadlines to get it done. That's, I think, very much entrepreneurship. But for me, I do consulting. So I've been pretty much running, call it my one woman marketing and communications consultancy for the last over 7 years now, since the end of 2016. And I left more of a 9 to 5 job to do this. But I would say I was kind of like set up to do it in a way, because I worked always at really small agencies, PR agencies, where I was taking on like so many responsibilities, running a team. At one point, I feel like I was running the HR department for the last PR agency I was at, and hiring all of the people and training all of these junior employees, and managing all the clients and all of that. And then I went into a venture capital firm. That was basically the last employer that I had. And that was also entrepreneurial, because I didn't really have a boss, and I was kind of advising all the companies that they invested in on marketing and communications. And like internally at the company, there was no one that was like senior to me besides the owners of the business, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like my journey led me to this. And the reason I started was because I parted ways with that employer, because they were kind of, it's really funny because the firm was like 12 years old, and I was like, okay, I'm excited to go to like a more stable place. They've
Speaker. I put something on me, and I was like, I just don't look. I don't want my belly to be showing and hanging out. So I'm like, let me just move positions.
It's a tiny little, I know.
It's
like a little throw.
It's a tiny little throw. It's not even a throw blanket. It's definitely
like
for decorative.
Yeah, exactly. We don't use it as a rug, but people use this as like a little decorative rug.
Well, right now I'm using it to cover the belly.
Exactly. Hey, listen, I got my blanket ready in case I get cold here. So I just love that you were just like, this is so tiny.
I'm like, Zelda, why did you give me your
It's funny because we do put that there sometimes, and here on her little Zelda has her own mid-century modern couch.
She surely does.
I was dying to show it in the camera, but alas,
did not work out.
So yeah, what I was saying was that like it's just so interesting because I did not plan to do this, and then I ended up kind of just like loving this journey. And I'm excited to talk about this later because there definitely have been a lot of ups and downs, things that are annoying, and it's hard. It's hard to also run like a PR and communications agency. Like the industry is really difficult and complex and constantly evolving. And so a lot of people don't stick to it for long. And so much paperwork and tax stuff and contractors you have to manage, and I have myself on a payroll. Like it's a lot of work, and there have been a lot of interesting moments and challenges and exciting times. So the way my business is, like it is like an official business, even though I have never given my company a name. or like a brand that I've tried to build. I just have preferred to leave it in my own name.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's when you're talking about those things, we're talking about the sacrifices that we both had to make. It, like in my case right now, it's an actual blanket. It's this rug for a 10-pound dog.
Oh my God. You're going to come back and I'm going to have like a giant rug.
But no, I mean, there is obviously sacrifices that you have to make. For me, when I started this, I think most entrepreneurs, when they start their company, and this does not apply to everybody, right? So take it with a grain of salt of what, but this is definitely what I think me and you have both experienced, but a lot of it entrepreneurs experiences. Most people start while they're already working, right? They start their side hustle, they find something that they like or whatever, and they start doing that. Which is what I did. I was working at a media buying agency, and I knew I wanted to start, like, if you listen to the 200th episode, you know that I started out as like a YouTube page that didn't end up working, and I completely kind of pivoted to more of the podcast space, which I think has definitely benefited me, right? And the and I did that while I was working. And then COVID hits. It was gave me a really, I was working from home, so I was able to still do both. I mean, I've always been able to multitask, job and the podcast, job and the podcast. And I started working for, there was about not even 6 months. I think it was September, October. There was about 3 months after I got let go from my job because they couldn't afford it anymore after COVID, to before I started my job at the city. There was about 3 months where I didn't have anything and I was still focusing on the podcast. And then when I worked at the city, I was still, again, juggling both things until May of 2023 when I got let go. And then it's been like, that's really what happened. Like, I was doing this for over 3 years before I finally was like, I got let go. And thankfully, I have my fiance, soon to be husband. We're like 60 days out.
Time's flying by.
Girl, it's crazy. One day, all of a sudden, I'm going to be like my husband. And I'm going to be like, wait, what's on my finger?
What is this?
And he was the one who encouraged me to focus on the podcast. And but doing both of those things, you are sacrificing time, sleep, socializing, like all of these things. I don't think you think about when you're doing it. But when it is true, when you love what you do, you'll find a way to make it work. But that doesn't mean that it's not ever going to feel like work.
Right.
Like when you're doing your taxes, that feels like work.
Yeah.
When you're trying to figure out certain things, that feels like work. But they're things that have to be done.
Yeah. So one of the things that you just mentioned was having like a support system, even behind the scenes. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't talk about, like just in terms of how you could even do it, and sometimes some people need to have savings. It depends on the kind of business you have, obviously, where you need to be investing. Some you don't need to invest into the business to start. You don't need to like raise money, let's say, but you need to have a financial kind of net so that you can continue, or have like a partner or a family or whatever. So what do you feel like are the things that you have kind of as like a safety or behind the scenes, like resources that are allowing you to be able to do this?
Well, I mean, the number one thing is Antonio, is my fiance. Like, honestly, and we live together now too. So that helps tremendously, because if we weren't, it would be very difficult for me to only focus on the podcast, because I know I mentioned in the 200th episode that it's, 2022 was a good year for ads for the podcast. I made a decent amount of money. 2023, I don't think just hit my podcast, but I think it hit a lot of small businesses in regards to revenue. I've heard a lot. I mean, we were talking about it earlier, but I've heard a lot of other small businesses say like 2023 sucked for small businesses. And it, so if it wasn't for Antonio, like and us living together, not just one, but both of those things, it would be really difficult to just focus on the podcast. It would have been really difficult to take as much time as I took to do the podcast tour last year. It would, like, I get stressed out. I don't show stress, and like we all show stress in different ways, right? I freaking got a pimple here, and I just saw one coming in because I've been so stressed out between money, between like the upcoming tour, because we're doing another tour in 2024, between the planning for the wedding, between just me trying to get stuff done, just trying to be the best health, my health. Oh girl, that's been like, a whole other thing. But just all of those things have been really stressing me out. And as vocal as I am, I tend to not vocalize my stress. But I internalize it, which makes I think it affects my health. I start getting migraines. Like that's where my migraines are triggered from, is stress more than anything else. So I start getting migraines. I start like, mine comes through in physically when I'm really stressed out, or I like lash out, or not lash out, but just like, the other day Antonio wanted me to do something and I was just like, and then he gets like, fine, don't worry about it. But it had nothing to do with that. It was just, I was so stressed out. My body was, like really exhausted and tired. And I was just like, oh.
And it's hard when you work for yourself, because a lot of times it's like you're paying for your health insurance, or there's some kind of creative thing happening for you to deal with healthcare. So you really have to protect yourself even more.
Yeah. I mean, and it's kind of all of the things too, because you're your own, your HR, you're the, like in my case, right, as a podcaster, I am the producer, I am the booker, I am like, thankfully I do have an editor who edits the audio for me, and that saves me. And the reason that started was because my mom was going through breast cancer for the second time. So I didn't have time, because I was trying to help take care of her. I didn't have time to edit the podcast. So I found an editor, and we've been working together for almost, I guess, almost 3 years now, because it started in 2021. And
shout
out JP. But otherwise, I'm a one-man band.
Yeah.
Like, I designed my own website. Thankfully, I had a friend who helped with the directory, but I still want to change the directory up, right? Yeah. And he's helped like change some things for me, but initially I created the website myself. Yeah.
And if you don't initiate, things are not going to happen, of course.
No.
So I think another, on that note, we talked about kind of.
But what about you? You didn't say what you sacrificed.
So
no, I'm not talking about resources. It's sacrifice.
Oh, sacrifice.
Yeah.
For me, definitely.
This is not an interview. This is a conversation. Ellie, stop. You're not interviewing
more
me.
About you.
This is a conversation. You look. Ellie's so different when we're having conversation. When we have conversation, we're sitting down at the table and we're having a real good conversation. Then she sits down and she's like, so tell me about you. No, this is a conversation. You're an entrepreneur too.
Because this is what I'm getting the chisme now. I like to get the chisme from you, and then behind the scenes, I'm like, oh my god, this is what's happening. No, you're right. So what things did I miss? I missed
what things have you had to sacrifice?
Yeah, so I think for me, it's been I would say probably just like prioritizing maybe like relationships in my life, like. I think in general with my career, even before entrepreneurship, I just like left my house and I was like, bye family, I got no time for you guys and this drama and whatever's going on. Like, I gotta just keep hustling, and
Every
I have
day I'm hustling.
exactly, and like I didn't have any regrets about that because like I did not have ability to juggle everything. And then I feel like every like relationship I've been in as well over these last few years, especially working for myself, it's also having to sacrifice because people are like, you're still on your laptop or you're still doing this or like, come on, like let's do a lunch break or whatever it is.
Yeah.
It's like I can't because then let's say if during the middle of the week I decide I'm going to do something, spend time on, take Friday off because I'm going to be doing errands. There's no taking that time off. I have to put the time back in.
Oh, girl, there has been times where I have forgotten to do something during the day and I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm like, I forgot to do this. And then I have to do it in the middle of the night because it has to be done. Even there's been times where I totally forgot to schedule a podcast. Like everything is done. And for some reason I forgot to schedule it. And then I'm up for the next hour, maybe not an hour if it's already done, but I just have to like, but I'm up for the next at least half an hour, right?
Yeah.
Half an hour to an hour, putting it in the system and putting in the links and putting in the bio and whatever else needs to go in there. And that's something that has happened more than once.
Yeah.
Where I'm like, shit, I forgot to do this.
And again, going back to where we were saying, like, if you do what you love, sure, you might love the actual interviewing and the podcasting and the conversations, but there's so many steps. I mean, how many hours do you think it takes to get one episode done? Like, how many tasks are there to get one episode done?
Because obviously the episodes themselves, right? And for you, obviously doing PR communications is very different as well. Or, I guess in a similar thread, but the podcast itself, the interview itself might only take an hour to an hour and 15 minutes. But then you're talking about like making sure you get the email back and you're sending the email to make sure that somebody has scheduled it, any follow-up. Then I have to go to the website, to their social media to look up information about them just to make sure like, vetting them.
Right.
All of that. And then the post stuff is obviously sending it over to the editor, but getting it back, and when I was telling this to you earlier too, I can't just get it back and post it.
Right.
I still have to listen to it because as awesome as JP is, there's sometimes mistakes that can be made. And it may not be a mistake he made. It might have been a system glitch, right? That does something to the episode. Or it might be like, hey, I need you to add this back in. But if I don't go back and listen to that, which is another entirety of the episode, then like something can fall through the cracks.
Right.
And that has happened to me. And that falls solely on me.
Right.
Because there was an episode that it sounds like there was just a glitch when it got transferred over. Right? If I would have listened to the whole episode or at least listened up to that point, I would have caught it. But I was like, oh no, it always sounds good. And what JP does always sounds great. But I think again, I think there was a glitch because during my talk of like wine break, grab that glass, whatever I say during that part, the ad was running at the same time. So it was like my voice over the ad voice. So it sounded really weird. But I didn't listen to that entire episode, so I didn't catch it. I didn't catch it until the next time I wanted to go back to the rewind episodes that we do a couple times a year. That's when I caught it. And I was able to go back to the raw audio and edit it myself because I didn't want to have like JP have to go back. It was just silly. But again, then I have to take that time.
Social media,
making sure we're tagging, making sure now I do video clips. I have Opus Clip, which helps. So if you need help clipping videos, Opus Clip, like I pay for an annual membership. And so then you have the audio clips, the video clips. I do all of my own editing for YouTube videos. So I do have to go in again, watch it, take anything out. Like if something is wrong or whatever, take anything out, add like the intros and the intro outro and everything like that. So that's again another.
So it's like already 4 hours.
Yeah.
For the one episode. And then I'm sure you have to notify the person who was a guest. So there is just so much time that people forget goes into all of these tasks. Like when you're employed somewhere, thankfully, usually there's a team of people or more junior people or more senior people so that all the responsibility is not on you. Like for me, even if I've hired contractors, like I've gotten to the point where I'm like working on a client that's like tens of thousands of dollars, let's say, right? But then I'm contracting people out. When it's a project that big, I of course have to have a team. Let's say they're ghostwriters. Let's say they're helping with social media video clips or copywriting or helping build out a website, or I've hired like videographers to do like a YouTube series for a client, which is super fun. Podcasting, blogs, like whatever it is, the bigger the project is, I have all these people. Guess who's managing all of them? Obviously me. I'm making sure they're getting paid, they're getting, they're invoicing.
Well, that's the other thing.
The taxes,
Girl.
like there's so much. And so I have to really, I think something I thought of when you said this about your mom, when your mom was sick, you were like, I got no time to be the editor. You hired somebody out. It's like you really have to start making those hard decisions about what's my time versus what I need to outsource or hire somebody for. And I've had that many times in my business, and I've like scaled up and down. At one point I had like 2 different assistants that were helping me with my business, plus the contractors, then 1, then 2, then 1, then like last year I took a whole like 6-month break. January was my 7th month, but I took a whole 6-month break, and the end of 2022 is when I was like, talked to my assistant. I was like, I got to pause because next year I want to just like really shrink things down and have less responsibility and only focus on like clients that are maybe smaller, or I don't have to have so many moving parts, because it was just a lot. It's just a lot. And you're juggling
and then that's
a lot
whole
in life.
nother stress. Mm-hmm. Because also here's the other thing too, right? Is getting paid.
Yeah.
And we've both dealt with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
In regards to, like I said, I have I still have ads from 2022 that I'm still waiting for the advertisers to pay for.
2022.
Yeah, from December of 2022 that I'm still waiting for the advertisers to pay from. And that affects my business.
Yeah,
that affects what I can do, right? And thankfully, and even now, like when we did the tour in 2023, I didn't have any big sponsors. We had a lot of in-kind sponsors, which was rad because we got to do, but like all of the ticket sales, I didn't make any profit from those, right? From the ticket sales, that was going to pay the vendors that we hired.
Yeah.
That went to go pay for the spaces that we were renting. It went to the cheese and charcuterie people that we hired. It went to, a photographer, a videographer, and thankfully we had some people that volunteered their services, which was truly amazing because they didn't need to, and it's so appreciated. Mm-hmm. But if you're not getting paid, it's hard to then it becomes hard to be a vendor. We're not here's the thing, I want to make sure people are really aware. It's not like we're trying to say don't be an entrepreneur or anything. I just think that sometimes, like you said at the very beginning, it's so glorified. There's so often times that we don't talk about like the really hard things. Mm-hmm. You don't have to be an entrepreneur, because when you're an entrepreneur, I feel like you're on almost 24/7. Mm-hmm. When you have a regular job, like when you have a 9-to-5 job, those are your hours. And if you have a 9-to-5 job and they're trying to make you work beyond that, make sure you're getting paid. Because you do not, yeah.
And that's another thing too. I think it's hard because people want to work for themselves just because the company culture these days, it's okay to not treat your employees great, to treat them in a very disposable way. So there's been many layoffs.
Let's say it's not okay, but people don't, that's what they do.
That's become the standard in this corporate culture. So people are understandably very tired of that. And so it's like, well, I might as well work for myself. And so it's like, how do we kind of adjust, I guess, our expectations with that, where it's like, how could we still get what we need to from that? From
if you're not
these types of
disciplined, being an
jobs?
entrepreneur is not for you.
Yeah.
If you're not just like the time management part of it as well,
Mm-hmm.
because like I said, like I fully admit I'm like an accidental entrepreneur. I felt like I was trying things, but I know myself as well, right? I know how, and I think that's also something like I am not the type of person who, when I feel like I'm with somebody, I always knew, or prior to the Wine and Chisme podcast, I always knew if I was in my own company, I had to have other people as part of it with me.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it was just my own, I feel like I would get lazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wasn't like it sounds really weird, but it's really true. I felt like I wasn't taking myself seriously. So if I'm not taking myself seriously, who the hell else is going to take me seriously, right? But when I started the podcast, I didn't start the podcast to make money. I was like hoping one day I would, but it was really because I felt this void in the podcast,
Mm-hmm.
world that I thought really needed to be filled. And that's why I started doing it. Now, um, but again, when people are expecting something, a new episode every Wednesday, when they are expecting these things, felt like it gave me purpose, and that I think for me was the difference. Like I felt like I had purpose,
Mm-hmm.
and I felt like I knew I had deadlines, which works very well for me. I know that's not for everybody, but again, I know myself.
Right.
You have to know yourself to know like what are the things that you're willing to do or willing not to do.
Yeah.
In order to make this type of life work, because
Yes.
if you're not willing to put in the time, and I'm not gonna lie, there's some days we were talking about it earlier, like I get up really early, I try and work out, I'll take the dogs out, and then I'll sit down because Antonio, because of he's in the service industry,
Mm-hmm.
he works late and he sleeps in. So I try and start working while he's sleeping to get stuff done. Because once he's up, I don't get as much stuff. I'm not even like, because I'm in a 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom. I don't have a separate, and this is like you were saying, oh yeah, that's helped you guys.
Yeah.
Because I don't have a separate space from him. I work at the kitchen table, and that's where I do my interviews. That's where most of the things and I have a fold out desk where sometimes I'll sit at the couch and do stuff.
Yeah.
But otherwise, like I don't have a separate space. And people might say, well, why don't you go to a coffee shop? Well, I'm trying to save money.
Yeah, and also
like,
they don't have maybe secure Wi-Fi.
That's a big thing for me.
You can't record there.
Yeah, I can't record it.
There's privacy and also noise. Like you said, the internet is not secure. You don't want somebody like hacking into your files or something. And also, yeah, like you said, then you'll have to be buying coffee all the time, or maybe get a co-working space that costs money. So it is hard, and I feel that connects back to the sacrifice, because in my first 1 or 2 years, I also didn't have a space. I was living in a 1 bedroom. That actually affected my health really badly, because I was just like working on my laptop everywhere and I didn't have a setup. So I ended up having a problem with my knee, which was kind of based on like my posture and my shoulders, because I kept and I had one of those tiny laptops, because my last job was like the MacBook,
like those little teeny.
It's like smaller than the MacBook Air. It wasn't called the Air. It was like the little tiny one.
Oh my god!
I still have it, and I don't use it. Now I have a giant MacBook Pro, which is another story, because those things are massive to carry around. So there. But yeah, like I was just like, how was I using this? It's literally like a little bigger than an iPad. Is it an iPad mini?
That's an iPad mini.
Okay, so that laptop that I'm talking about is like the iPad regular. I feel like the screen is like that small. It's like 8 inches. So I was just like hunched over on my little laptop all the time, didn't have it eye level. So that's a big learning lesson for me, because that did affect my health, and I had to see a chiropractor for a month, and then like a physical therapist. Like it was crazy. So you have to, sometimes you're sacrificing that, or you say, am I able to like figure something else out? But yeah, something that's helped me a lot is having some kind of office, or just like carrying around, like I have a setup, like a little lift thing for my laptop to stand it on, and I got the Bluetooth keyboard and the Bluetooth mouse and stuff, so I feel like I have a little bit more of a
I want
setup.
the Bluetooth keyboard. I have one that plugs in though, so at least I have that, but I can't take it anywhere.
Yeah,
I mean, I can technically. I can wrap it up.
I
But
kind of do that. I have a little sleeve for it, and then
yeah,
I carry it, and then I have like the thing that pops up so it's eye level. You have to do all those things to protect
I'm
yourself.
yeah,
But
because I have two little boxes, and then the stand. That's how I have, like, because if I just have it at the table, it's too low, and even
yeah.
just with the stand. And
Mhm.
then when I do interviews, I had that because because of the microphone, so you can seize over the microphone,
Yeah.
so the microphone's not blocking all those things.
Yeah. So
Oh.
you're
Okay,
like looking
wait.
at
The
each other's
also
phones.
the oh, hi dear, hello,
Hey.
darling. But the other thing we were talking about is knowing how you work,
Oh my god,
because we
yeah.
were
This is a
talking.
good one.
Yes, because like me, you see me, or if you don't see me, I don't have a notebook in front of me. I am very much like, okay, now I do have a whiteboard at home, and I do write down things on the whiteboard.
Mhm.
But when I'm doing like the podcast, I don't write questions down
Mhm.
because I want it to be a conversation. I
Mhm.
don't want it to feel like an interview. I
Mhm.
want it to feel like a conversation, like it flows. And for me, the way I can do that is not having questions and truly listening to the person that I'm talking to. And that's how my questions come, right? But me and Ellie were sitting down talking about what we wanted to talk about today.
Mhm.
And this girl is sitting down writing 2
I
pages
have
of
2 pages of notes.
notes.
It's right here, guys. I haven't really looked at it, but it's helpful.
What?
The process is helpful to
Yes.
me.
But have you
Like,
noticed I've been like I remember the things that we were talking about.
yeah, I mean, that's the thing. I have no memory, as I've mentioned to you. I think it's an ADHD thing, or maybe not. But I really like love that pre-brainstorming process. And so now Jess is used to me, and she's like, I'm gonna get to your house, we're gonna record. I was like, no, we're gonna go to lunch. I was like, I found a place that's like outside in this
Our
like
creative juices kick
Chevy,
a
yeah, it's
flow.
like Chevy Chase Road Canyon.
It's not Chevy, it's Chevy.
Chevy Chase. Is that what I said?
Chevy is the car, Chevy is the
Chevy.
man.
Chevy Chase. What did I
Chevy
say? Chevy
Chase.
Chase.
Wait, because
Chevy
it's spelled
Chase.
like Chevy, like Chevrolet,
Yeah, Chevy Chase, but
which is
it's
the car,
Chevy.
but it's named after the actor.
Yes,
Chevy Chase.
Chevy Chase. It sounded like I said it like a Latino accent. I said like Chevy Chase.
It's Chevy Chase.
It's Chevy Chase. Chevy Chase Canyon. But yes, not he. There's a road, and it's like in a canyon, and it's very cute. And I thought the restaurant was like really cute and nice. And I love Glendale, and it's like, oh my god, it was so cute with like little flowers everywhere and whatever. I'm just a person that like loves a creative brainstorm. I love, like, you see my watercolor there. Like, I like to do that creative side and the brainstorming and this and that. And like, my problem is, it's like now I have to move to that into execution. But I love that side of it. So I was like, ooh, we're going to get our chisme of just life in general.
Yes,
and like,
that was good.
I have fun. I just personally have fun doing that. So now Jess is like, okay, we'll go and we'll do it. And
I don't mind.
she's like meeting me in the middle.
Yeah, I don't mind doing that. I just am like, I'm not going to write it down.
No, of course not. But I love it. But even if I don't reference it, it's like I love the process. So yeah, going back to learning your working style.
But I do like that for general, like, what am I going to do this week? I do like to do that.
Yeah, I love to. I mean, even my notebook now, this is the format of a to-do list. If you can't see it, it's like lines with like check boxes. So that's the kind of notebook I have. I have another notebook that says to do. Girl, I just have like 5 notebooks.
So do I.
I don't even like look at them. I just love the process of
at work when I was
writing.
at the office, when I was working for the city. I had a whiteboard, and I would write like the things that needed to get done that week and stuff. So I do like to do like, okay, this is what needs to accomplish this month, this week, today. I do enjoy that, because I do enjoy the check mark.
Yeah.
Right? Like the old school person in me, like, I like to see the check mark that it's been done. But like I said,
working styles.
Yeah, but when it comes to like the actual interview process for the podcast, I don't like to do that.
So, okay, so going more into working style, I think that if I were to give advice, it would be don't go out on your own and do this until you do know what your working style is. And kind of a lot of times you do have to get that from the workplace, from like a 9 to 5, or not a 9 to 5, but being employed for somebody else, because you will be taught like people's expectations, and like you said, needing a deadline. Someone's giving you deadlines, you need to get paid, you need to show up and do the work. So I feel like you can kind of learn from there. The thing that is unfortunate is that a lot of times like the workplace is not really built for different people's working styles, which is why not everyone does well with that.
Which is why so many people are hesitant to go back. They don't want to go back into the office, because when you are working from home, you get to
have your
you get the flexibility of how you like to work, whether it's having music on, whether it's dead silent, whether it's sitting like that, like how we are, whether it's like, and you're not paying for gas, you're not
food, maybe
food, commuter time, all of those things. But
no one's like sitting over your shoulder being like, did she clock in exactly at 9? Like maybe you like to go for a walk. So I do think that if you want to do this, you really need to think about your working style and what energizes you and what depletes you.
Yeah.
So that okay, how am I going to have to focus my time? How could I kind of self-motivate and get things done? And there's some ways, I think that the best way is just like asking yourself those questions of when do I find myself to be the most, I guess, productive, or not just productive, but like energized, because you kind of like need the energy. So one thing that I looked at a few years ago when I was starting to work for myself, or not even. So what I was saying before was that like in my career, it kind of went this route where it was like, kind of always was very entrepreneurial, because I worked at small companies and I was wanted to like eagerly take on a lot of responsibility. And so by the time I got to my last job, which was that financial like investment firm, it definitely was like, okay, figure it out, do whatever, like I didn't have anyone giving me any kind of structure, what I had to do. So that was the point where I really had to sit and learn and figure out. We're watching Zelda. We're like, where is she going to go?
Hi,
ooh,
Mama.
Jess is the lucky one now.
Where's Zelda?
So, come on, honey. This is your blanket. You should know. She's like, what are you doing with that? So what was I saying? So I felt like I had to really reflect and think about that. And so something that I looked into was something called the makers versus the managers schedule. Did we talk about this ever?
No.
And this is something that I think Google came up with. And they were realizing that there's people that are makers and there's people, of course, that are managers. And makers is like, you could be a writer, a content creator, an engineer. You need these like hours of uninterrupted time to get shit done. Versus a lot of workplaces function in the manager style, which is everything catering to a manager, where the manager is not doing the tasks. They're like checking in on the tasks. And so how could you expect somebody to get things done if you have all of their day booked up in meetings?
Yeah.
Or like every hour they have another meeting. When are you supposed to like sit uninterrupted and do the work?
Yeah. The last job I had, I did talk to my boss, and I was like, hey, because working in a city office, believe me, there is like the creativity juices were hard to come by, because talk about just not, like I need, like sometimes my best ideas come when I'm on a walk, or like I need to have more than four walls around me. So I would let him know, hey, just so you know, from time to time I might go to the coffee shop, or I might go somewhere else, because it's just, and when you're not because I'm a creative person, when you're not a creative, it's really hard to understand. So I had to explain to him why, because when he was like, well, what do you mean you have to go to a coffee shop? I'm like, do you understand what I'm looking at? Like,
yeah,
you looking at all day?
It was like an open cubicle.
Yeah.
Yeah, so people are walking by, you're like, ooh, what's going on there?
Well, the front was high, so it wasn't like super open, but the side, yeah, but it was just like, I said, this place is not conducive to like creativity. I need like to take walks. I need to sometimes get into a different area. I need to like let whatever. And when I explained it to him, he was like, oh, okay, I get it. Yeah,
Yeah.
no problem. Don't worry about it. If you need to, just let me know. And, that's fine. But you're right, because you have to understand your working style.
Yeah.
It's very hard for me sometimes, even at the house, like I have to take walks or I have to take a break.
Yeah.
Because sometimes, like, between doing, like, sending emails, replying to emails, looking for potential sponsors, editing the video, all of that, like, there would be times where I'm just like, I need to get away from my computer.
Yeah.
And I just shut my computer and go somewhere else and just step away, because if I don't, like, it becomes kind of numb, almost like I'm not seeing what I should be seeing when
Yeah.
I'm looking at those things.
Yeah. So you have to, that's what I was figuring out, is like structuring my week. And so they had that where they said they will structure it, and they gave like an example of how the week might go. So for example, Monday, we know people are probably going to do meetings. Tuesday, Wednesday are good days to just have like hours of time unblocked without meetings. She's getting her belly rubs. This girl knows how to get it. And so they would have, like, let's say those 2 days a week where
She's
it's
talking
just
about
like,
Zelda, not me.
oh, sorry, for those that don't see the video, this girl knows how to get her belly rubs. You were talking about your belly before too.
I know.
Oh my gosh. No, we're talking about Zelda, my little fairy princess queen elf fluffy dog. Yeah, so that was something that I learned from. And so because I never thought about that way, but they said, like, you need those hours of uninterrupted time, because imagine you get into the office, it's 9 a.m. You know you have a meeting at 10. You're thinking about the meeting the whole time. Then you get out of the meeting. Okay, you're like, okay, great. Now I could work on my work, whatever your creative work is, right? Okay, no, now there's a meeting in 3 hours. You're kind of like, oh shit, like, you know that it's coming. You know that it's coming. So even if you have the 2 hours, it just keeps interrupting you, because you kind of like constantly are thinking, let me check my watch. Like, when's the alert going to happen? Like, you can't fully focus. So they recommended that that's how they did it. And they had those 2 days of like just unstructured open time. Then Thursday, Friday, they would say, okay, you kind of should do the meetings then again. Not really like managerial meetings, but maybe like coffee meetings or whatever, because that's kind of where it's getting towards the end of the week and everyone's like, almost Friday. And like, you lose productivity.
Yeah.
So it's like a nice time to fill with things like that are going to energize me. So I really took that to heart when I started working for myself. And I literally would be like, in that point, I was living in Brooklyn. I would have my day where, like, Monday was when I would like figure out, let me think about, what do I want to get done this week? What's my schedule going to be like? What are the tasks? Like, what are the deadlines that I need to check in on, right? Agendas, whatever it was.
Well, let me ask you a question, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but is there a day, like, I have to, like, even now, I make sure there's one day a week that I do not have anything planned. Like, I don't have any work planned, and those days are Sundays. Like, I don't schedule interviews. I don't do any work like that, because I'm doing work in some form or another those 6 days a week.
Right.
Even if I don't have it, unless I don't have an interview, sometimes I take Saturdays for myself. Just depends on what is going on. But usually once Antonio leaves for work, then I'll start working.
Sunday's your day.
But Sundays, I don't. Like, Sundays, I do not work. Do you have a day for yourself like that?
I think that Fridays are becoming for me where I might do like a meeting in the morning, and then I'll try to keep my Friday pretty open. And like, I don't want to go out or do anything Friday nights either, because I'm like, no. By Friday, I'm tired. Then Saturday, I'll usually have errands and stuff like that. And then by Sunday, what used to work for me, which obviously I haven't, like I said, I've been on a sabbatical, but Sunday kind of evening, I would start to like settle down and chill, maybe watch a show. And I kind of would start to like plan for the week ahead on that day, because it felt nice before getting into work on Monday, like client work, to start to check in on things, so that by Monday I have my to-do list, because I've kind of done it Sunday night. So that used to be what I would do, which felt kind of nice for me. But yeah, I feel like for me, Fridays is what I like.
I don't mind, because now that I'm working for myself, like, Mondays I can do that. Monday, you know what I mean? Like, Mondays I can get up, work out, take the dogs for a walk. Antonio's still sleeping. So then I'm like, okay, what needs to be done this week? So like, so it's not like full on. That's usually the days like I'm like, okay, these guest requests came in. I can send emails out. Like I don't I changed my schedule, so I only do interviews Thursday, Friday, Saturdays.
Okay, I was actually going to ask you about that. How have you structured your
Yeah,
week?
so Mondays is usually kind of those get ready days. And I think when you work for yourself, you can structure it any way that you want it. Oh, I'm sorry, Zelda. She's like, why did you stop?
Just kicking you.
Yeah. She literally looked up, like, excuse
I
me,
know.
ma'am.
She got up and she was like, girl, you better, someone kick you again.
But and then Tuesdays I alternate. One week I'll have my office hours calls with We All Grow Latina, which has been really great. Yeah, so we're able to like everybody's able to ask questions, they're able to give feedback and everything like that. So that's bi-weekly, and then the other weeks I have a meeting with my PR agency to go over like who are we pitching, what do we want to do, and everything. So shout out to Erica from Braid Communications, because like I was saying earlier, like Erica has my back so hard. I don't want to get into details of like all of the things, but it hasn't been easy, right? It hasn't been easy in any aspect. The easiest part for me are the actual interviews. That's the easiest part of the podcast for me. Everything else is like, even sometimes getting guests and like all of these things, because you have to schedule them and make sure schedules fit, and it's not always the easiest thing. But you got to do, again, you just kind of got to do what you got to do to for me to make my dreams come true, for you to make your dreams come true. My dream is not necessarily to be a gazillionaire. My dream is really to be able to live, is to live a life of purpose, and to live a life where I'm not scared about spending money.
Yes. I would say that's the same for me.
Yeah. Like, I don't want to feel like, oh, great, I can't do this, or I can't do this. I want to be able to say, yeah, absolutely, I can do that. If that's what I want to do, being able to do that without being scared or having a scarcity mindset.
Yeah. That is a great also point about something to think about. Do you have a scarcity mindset getting into this entrepreneurship life? Because that becomes really hard with prioritizing for yourself. Like, what type of, like, let's say for me, it's like a client-based, I guess, service business. It's different, where I have to really think about who are the people I'm taking on, like the personalities, the budget. Can I actually get the work done? Sometimes it's like a year project. I've had client for up to 4 years. Some is only a few months. And so making that decision, it's like, I don't like to make it based on the money. Sometimes you do have to do that, but it's just really hard. You have to really think like, okay, no, I don't have to take this. There are always opportunities coming my way, and you really have to shift your mindset. There's some like spirituality that's involved in all of this too, I think. So,
the other thing that we were talking about was when we're at lunch or brunch or whatever, right?
She's like, whatever
it is, at our brainstorming session
in nature on Chevy Chase
is we talked about like knowing your work style and knowing all this, but just realizing or understanding that it's okay if this is not I mean, we touched on it a little bit at the beginning, but it really is okay if you decide this is not the journey for you. If you try it and go, yeah, this isn't for me. I did that several times. Like, I did that so many times where it's like, no. But again, it's like by doing that, I realized what I did need in that type of journey, right? And knowing for me, I need deadlines. Knowing for me, like, what motivates me to keep going. So does this entrepreneurial journey suck? Yes and no. Like it sucks in the fact that you do have to you do have to sacrifice, you do have to, I mean, truly. And look, everybody has their own journey, everybody has their own thing, but I think most entrepreneurs will say yes, you do have to sacrifice to get the things that you want. But ultimately, I think once you get there, you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad. Like I wouldn't want to do anything else.
Yeah.
Like because even though, when did you get your else, like that was the other thing we were talking about, is the money you have to spend to be an entrepreneur.
Right.
Like for me, some people start a podcast with just a mic and you going on like their voice memos or something. That wasn't the case for me. I did start out very small. I still am very small compared to a lot of, like, I don't have a stand with all of the things. Like I have the mic stand, right, that's in front of me. But some people have like the whole setup and a board and this and that. No, I plug just directly in my computer, right?
Right.
Now I have an iPad with a tripod that we can put up, but it's still not like this crazy setup. Now I have lavalier mics, right?
Yes,
Like we
official.
go, you go into all of these smart, but even when I talk about like I have to pay for Zoom or Riverside, or if you, depending on what you're using,
Yeah.
or Zencaster, I still have to pay for Canva, for my social media stuff. I still have to pay an editor to edit the podcast. I still have to pay for my website and my email. I like all of those things. I think when we start out, we're not thinking about until you
Right.
realize, like, oh crap, I need to have
There's a
it.
lot of everything is a subscription
Yeah.
now. It's
Like
just a lot.
I was saying, I like Opus. I subscribe to, because when I put in when I upload the YouTube videos, now I can put that in there and it automatically does clips for me. Um, the same with the audio clips using Headliner. Like those, all of those things are hard costs. So I can promote the show, but I am gonna not lie, I'm sometimes really bad about promoting the show, because sometimes I feel like, and this I think is a I don't know if I would call it imposter syndrome or if I would call it something else, but I always feel like, am I doing too much? Does that make sense? Like, am I doing too much that people just are like, shut the fuck up? Like, we're tired. We know you have a podcast. Yay. Like, we don't need to see you promoting it every single day of the week. So I end up only doing maybe once or twice a week and trying to do other things. If you
That's
got,
hard because people
yeah,
miss things.
exactly. So I know that there's better ways to be able to market the podcast, or maybe, I don't know. It just becomes really difficult sometimes trying to find that middle ground where you don't feel like you're oversaturating people with this, with what you're doing, because I don't sell a product or service.
Right.
Like other people have products and services that they're selling. I am trying to share these stories from these amazing people. And
right, like some people do the podcast to the end goal. It's a piece of content for them to promote their business, whether they're a
exactly.
coach or a therapist or whatever it is. Like it's a piece of their content strategy. For you, like it is the main thing, and then you are trying to do other things on top of that, like an event in service of the podcast, an event series, or
and ultimately that still is about the podcast and about the stories, and we would try and make sure that we're highlighting, wines that come from the directory, that come from those within the Latina community. We find, our uh, cheese and charcuterie come from others within, communities of color. Same with the people that do the editing and the photos and videos and everything like that. Because I think I said last time, like I want to put my money where my mouth is, right? If I'm here to promote stories that come from across communities of color, like that's who I'm going to hire to do these things. And sometimes, we definitely look for those um event spaces. It doesn't always happen. 2 out of the 3 for last year were owned by Latinos. And so it is sometimes hard because I'm not selling a product or service. So sometimes sometimes I feel overlooked. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's hard because you see podcasts that maybe haven't had a and I think this is not just a podcast, but I think this comes with the entrepreneurial journey is you see somebody who's maybe not working hard, or maybe they're no longer doing that anymore, but yet they're still getting so much attention. Yet they're still like, I've seen podcasts that haven't podcasted in 2 years and they're still on these like lists of podcasts you must listen to. And I'm like, do you know how many Latino, Black, Asian podcasts that are out there creating so much amazing content and they're not being highlighted?
Mm-hmm.
And that includes myself. I'm not gonna lie, that includes
Mm-hmm.
me. And it does get very frustrating sometimes, and it does sometimes feel like, am I speaking into the void? Do you ever feel like that with your business? Like you feel like, am I speaking into, what the hell?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it could be exhausting. I think for me, I'm trying to think about how it might relate. Like I don't really do any kind of I don't really do promotion for it, I guess. And like I don't even have a name,
you
but
also have the Latinx collection.
yeah, Latinx
Collective, sorry, yeah.
So I guess with that, that's something more of like I feel passionate about, like getting it out there, which I keep pausing things and life be lifing. I didn't want to have two companies. So for that, that's something where like I did put so much like thought into it, and it would get tiring because like I kind of started it as this way to like celebrate Latinos and really specifically be about like empowering them with really positive stories. And I had this newsletter and this online community and this directory. And then I just kind of felt like other people, like I would see people kind of like subscribe and then like launch something very similar. And I was like, oh, like this is so tiring. But maybe they work for like a big brand, big name brand. So again, it's like I'm doing everything on myself, but then they kind of have, again, this backing, these resources that I don't have. So it is exhausting. And like, for example, the podcast space, every freaking celebrity is launching a podcast because they know there's money in it. And so that's been taking over, I feel like.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting sometimes. Like I remember you were saying recently you listened to this particular podcast. We won't share it because we don't want to bash any other podcast, because everybody has their own style and what they like to do.
Yeah.
But you were like, I didn't resonate with this, and it is a Latina led podcast and everything. And you were saying that you didn't resonate with it, and I was like, well, why? Why didn't you? I've met these hosts in person. They're lovely people in person. I personally have not listened to them, not because I don't want to. I wanted to listen to it. I need to, but
there's
like
just so many.
There's just so many, and I think it's always a great thing to listen to, hear what you like, what you don't like. What are they doing that you could maybe implement for yourself, or oh, you know what, that is a good idea, or maybe, oh, you know what, that's not really my style. And I think it's good to hear other things, but I always just find it so interesting of what I'm drawn to and what I'm not.
Yes, and I think on that note too, like everybody is kind of reaching somebody, I guess. And so for me with the Latinx Collective, I would see, I guess, people launch things after, and I was like, oh, well, I'm glad this inspired you. That's awesome. And then I would kind of think, do I still feel like I have a purpose with this? Like, do I still feel like there's a need for it? And then I would have to sit and reflect and be like, yes or no.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I paused for a while because I was like, I don't think there's the original reason why I started Latinx Collective was because I was working in like corporate space, tech and venture capital world. Not there was like zero diversity back then. It hasn't changed that much in the last 7 years, I guess, but there's definitely a lot more. And back then I was having an issue because it was right after like the 2016 election. So much negativity about Latinos in the news. I was never reading anything positive about us in the mainstream news, but yet I was working a lot with the media and like the tech and the business world, and there were like no Latinos ever. And that's because they didn't have the connections, they didn't have the resources, they didn't have the funding. So I felt like I needed to launch it for myself. So I started writing the newsletter, and it was really kind of like a letter to myself of like, oh my God, this entrepreneur is doing this. Or did you know like the CEO of Kind Snacks is a Latino man and they never talk about that? Or this person has a cool podcast or this author. And it was kind of a way for me because, like we talked before, I love lists, I love research, I love like collecting and learning these things. So I was kind of doing it for myself, and it ended up like growing so much, and people were really resonating, and I was finding out so many ways that they were using it. Like I had at one point, it was like a teacher, like who was the head of diversity and inclusion at some school in Portland, and she's like, there's not a lot of diversity here. And so I forward it to the teachers to like make sure they're reading and staying on top of news and sharing it with their students, because they're not reading they're reading only the mainstream news, and there's only one thing covered.
Yeah.
So you're doing all this research. I sent it to them so they could see like, oh my God, look, here's like there was an article that I think I shared back then about Teen Vogue had done here, like the Latinos that you don't learn about in the history books. And so she was like, oh my God, amazing. I gotta send this to the teachers. So that was like so inspiring to me to see that, okay, cool, like I'm doing this work, there's a reason.
Mm-hmm.
Since then, there's so many media companies now that are trying to do that. And there's also mainstream media who suddenly want to cover Latino stories. But guess what? We're going back again in the circle where they keep getting their budget cut.
Yeah.
So as an example, I remember there's this recently in the last year, there was like this arm of the LA Times.
Oh, yeah.
Who launched a Latino section. And I feel very like cynical at this point because I was like,
but the fact is they had that it was so recently launched within the LA Times,
which is super. It's how what's the percentage of Latinos in LA?
I don't know.
40-50% or something like that, right? And like there's like no Latinos, there's no Latino news in the newsroom. So it's extra frustrating because something like that launches and like we know better. So we're like, oh, great. They're going to launch this. They're going to get all the advertisers. They're going to grow the team. Once they have the archive of content, this is everything I was thinking. They're going to fire all these people. Now they have all their content. Now they have all the advertisers. They got the money. And then they don't actually want to invest, which is exactly what happened. And then I go back to thinking, okay, well, I guess there is a purpose for what I was trying to do because I'm not owned by anyone. I could decide if I want to continue or not. So I think I'm forgetting even your original question, but I feel like, yeah, it's just like, how do I want to continue and do this? Because you have to kind of think like, oh, you were talking about a podcast and like why did we like it or not like it? And there's always something for everyone. There's something for everyone. Like I realize that this isn't for me, but there's a lot of people that it's for, that podcast that we talked about, right? And then also what you're doing, it's like for you and the audience and like us having the conversation, there's people that really love it and there's people that maybe it's not for them for whatever reason. And so you're meeting a need. I feel like that's kind of when you could decide if you want to continue something. And that's like for me, like I said, with the Latinx Collective, like those things will happen and then I'll say, this is why I should continue doing this because there isn't this. I'm not feeling like that need for me is being met. So
did we hit all of the things that you wrote down?
Let me check my list, okay?
Because
let me check it.
I would hate to be like end
we gotta do a part 2 because we didn't cover everything. We talked about how it affects relationships, hardships. Did we talk about finding community and like a support system?
I mean, I think a little bit. We talked about support systems. For me,
what about community? Like now that you are an entrepreneur, like how do you feel like you've been able to? It's all this like get to work, girl.
Yeah. Oh, pat down. I think for me, We All Grow Latina has been a hugely helpful. I'm the Latina Podcasters is the network that I am part of. As the Wine and Chisme podcast is part of the Latina Podcasters Network. So, meeting other podcasters, men and women, actually, who were able to like message each other and share ideas from a podcasting standpoint is always great. We All Grow Latina is not necessarily about it is, I think, a lot about entrepreneurship and what are we doing and hey, I have this problem or I'm not sure or hey, guess what? This is where like can we celebrate this, which has been great. Last year I graduated from the Hope Latinas program, which is really designed for Latinas to learn about government to potentially run. I have no plans to ever run, but just from being like working in the city at that point, and then also just learning and getting connected to all of these other Latinas that I would be able to support has been huge. And honestly, for me, I would say we built really great community through social media. Which has been so awesome. I've interviewed countless people that I have met through TikTok and I've met through Instagram. I was just telling you, Threads has been freaking awesome for like the podcast network on Threads has been really freaking awesome because people are constantly like asking questions and sharing articles and stuff like that, which has been really, really cool.
Yeah.
So
I love that.
Yeah, I think you just have to, when you work from home, when you work
yourself
and
work from home.
Yeah, and work from home. You have to find creative ways to be able to connect with people. We met through a third party, right?
Yeah.
We met through somebody who introduced us. So I think you have to take advantage of those things too. If like I'm very much like, oh, I need to introduce you to so and so, or oh, you and so should meet,
or come with me to this. We've done that a lot.
Yeah.
Come with me to this event.
Oh, by the way, you're coming with me to an event next month, then it's up here in LA, but I put you down as my guest.
Love it. I'm always your plus one. Yeah, that's the fun thing. We went together to that wine event. That was a really fun.
The Latinx wine summit.
Yep, wine summit. That was really fun. We went to like a Me Too event. We talked about the last time. We won't get into the wine.
We went to a couple of Me Too events.
We went to a couple of events together. So that's the same for me too. It's like I try to go to events, connecting, people like Erica, your PR agency. I've known her a few years.
Which was so crazy.
I know. And I was like, oh my God. And then then I joined more community. I actually heard about it through somebody else, but I joined the board of the Hispanic Public Relations Association, LA, last year. And this year, I think I'm going to be on the national board maybe. So kind of figuring some things out. But she's on their I think she's the New York president.
Yeah, she's the president for the New York chapter. So I had asked,
somebody else recommended to me, but then I asked her, like, oh, how do you? So that's another way I tried to build community, especially in LA, where I was like, oh my God, it's so cool. Like I get to meet other, comms and PR people that are here locally and then be a part of this like national kind of whole, I guess, community. So I'm always doing that because I feel like, kind of back what I said with like what energizes me. It's like meeting in person. Now you're checking the list.
Yeah.
Because we had so many good topics, but we did cover a lot. So community is very important.
I think we actually hit everything.
Amazing.
But I will ask you, so this final question, let me ask you, what would you say if somebody is like, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to do this, what would be your like number one piece of advice to a potential entrepreneur, to a budding entrepreneur?
I think it would depend on what exactly they wanted to do, but I would say just do it. Whatever it is, start. Because that's advice that I got as well. And I was kind of like, oh, but how? Because you're like, you don't need to have a full LLC, a business bank account, a name. You don't need to actually do all of those things. You just have to start. There's always like a minimal way to just get it going to see if you actually like it. So if you have, there's so many different scenarios. I would love to have people write into you and tell you like, what's my scenario and how do I do it? That would be really fun to hear because it's so.
You know what? Where's my phone? Because I did actually put on Threads. Let's see if anybody responded.
That would be amazing.
Yeah, because I just did this last minute. I didn't even do it like. So it could be that nobody responded because I just did it so last minute and it's Saturday. Yeah, I don't have anything. Okay. Watch, I'll probably have something tomorrow. I'll probably have a bunch of stuff or on Monday.
We could cover it next time. But yeah, I think it just really depends on somebody's scenario. But if you're someone where you're like, I have this job, I have 10 years of experience already. Like I have some friends like this. Like they were a part of some layoffs last year. Because the tech industry, media industry has been just so crazy. And so they're kind of coming back to work now and they're like, I think I want to work for myself, but how do I do it? And I'm like, just do it. Like if you have the experience already, you know how to do the actual job, you could just like take a client on the side. They're like, well, what do I charge? It's like, whatever you can get. Seriously, at this point.
Yeah, when you start. But I agree because that's like when people are like, oh, I want to start a podcast.
Girl, I already tried that. Yeah,
but like people are like, oh, what, I want to do this. Look, nothing's ever like if you're waiting for the perfect time, there's no such thing. You just have to start.
Yeah.
You just have to start, because if you keep waiting and waiting, like, time passes regardless.
Right.
And what you decide to do with that time is up to you. So, if you have an idea now and you don't start it from until a year from now because you're waiting for everything to be perfect, you literally just wasted a year of that time when you could have been learning and could have been already making true money.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is, don't listen to, like, take everything that you see on social media with a grain of salt.
Right.
Like, seriously, when I see these videos are like, I gained 10,000, I made $76,000 in 30 days just by making a book online. Like, come on. Like, just be realistic for yourself. Don't fall for the get rich quick schemes, because I think history has shown us, like, that's not how it works. To sustain something. And sometimes it might work for a moment, but then people continue to do the things that, in the long run, people end up losing money that way.
Yeah. And you also, like, we touched on this earlier, which is why I wanted to bring it up. Like, you don't know what someone's situation is. They could be living at their mom's house, not ever having to pay rent for months, not have any bills, or whatever it is. Like, so it might be that much easier for them to do something. Or, like, I think about myself, like, I actually grew up with both of my parents have been entrepreneurs themselves at different points. And so I almost feel like I never really connected the dots to that, but I was like, wow, I actually saw that firsthand. I never thought about it. My dad had, like, bodegas that he owned. Now he's making apartments or whatever in DR. Like, my mom owned a flower shop with a business partner at one point. She always worked in Federal Express for like 30 years or something. She retired 2 years ago. But I kind of always saw this, like, hustle from them. So I almost feel like me having that exposure made it easier. I guess they weren't, like, questioning me at that point.
Oh, and I was the opposite. Yeah, I feel like a lot of times, especially maybe it's with all parents, but I really do think in particular Latino parents, or even parents that come from communities of color, it's one or the other, right? Like, it's either they were hustlers, they were entrepreneurs, or they went through the quote unquote traditional route, which is what my parents did. So they totally did not understand what I was doing. And, like, I think we talked about it before, and then they saw when they went to the LA event, like, oh wow, you have these people supporting you? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And then they also
like this,
were
oh my
like,
gosh.
We get it, because we see how this is your, like you said, personality, working style, what brings you joy, what you're good at. Yeah. And now they could actually see you in action.
Yeah.
My mom actually told me that at one point, where she's like, wow, it's so funny. Like, when you were little, like, you love reading, you're always writing. I would draw, like, comic books. I would draw in class, like, all these things.
Me too. I would write short stories.
Really? Yeah. So that's kind of like this. It's funny to see. She's like, it's funny to see you now where you do all of these things. So it's just very interesting. So I guess, thinking about, again, advice for people, like, just start, because you don't have to announce it. You don't have to tell everyone. You don't, just start some way, because you'll also get to see. And, like, we mentioned the word experiment earlier today. Like, I like to think of things in that way, where I'm like, this is an experiment. This is a test.
Oh yeah, like what we're doing even now.
Exactly. We're like, it's an experiment. It's a test. So you also don't have to feel so closely tied to it. And it takes a little pressure off. Yeah. So just try and do the thing. And it could be on a very small scale.
Yeah. We didn't do a month in Chisme. We just kind of,
we had our own entrepreneur Chisme.
Yeah, I think that's why we just were like, it's 4 years. Because we did the 200th episode, I didn't want to rehash the same thing. But we are going on tour again. I will say that. We're going to be in Chicago in June, Phoenix in September, and San Diego November 2nd, my birthday. Hey, Dia de los Muertos también. So, be on the lookout. We are going to be for the exact dates, and we're going to talk about finances. We're going to talk about health. Like, I think we're going to do, like, the parent child thing.
Ooh, love that.
Or the familial thing. And then we're going to talk about connecting with your ancestors for Dia de los Muertos.
Ooh, that's a
Perfect
great
day,
topic.
right?
Yes.
Perfect topic. So be on the lookout. And thank you, Ellie.
I loved it.
Another one in the books.
Aww.
Aww. So nice. So nice. I don't want to get.
I love it.
We're still wearing mics, so I don't want to get too.
I know. Hopefully, my hair didn't.
If it did, I'll just bill you to clean that up.
Perfect. Maybe like listen to the episode for 4 hours.
Yes. So I don't know. I guess I'll see how long we took. Actually, I can tell on here.
Yes, and please, people, if you have, I would love to answer questions about entrepreneurship. Any kind of questions going out on your own, things to think about, how do you start? That's a really fun one.
I know it is, and I have a lot of people have asked me like to start a podcast and everything, and I don't mind answering that question. I think here's the thing: when people say, "Oh, I don't know who to ask," just ask, because everybody has to start somewhere. Mm-hmm. Here's the other last, like final, right? Final. Everybody starts somewhere, and most people are willing to help. Mm-hmm. Like most people, will there be people that say no? Absolutely, but the answer is always no if you don't ask the question.
Good point.
All right.
Words of wisdom.
That's right. I'm wisdomous. Until next time, mi gente.
Bye.